Hi, welcome back to the show. Today we'll be interviewing Brian Ouellette. He is the co-founder and CEO of Pro Athlete Direct. Brian has worked as money manager on the Chicago Board of Trade, on Wall Street, and in Seattle's financial district. He was invited for several years as a commentator for Q13 Fox News in the This Morning in Seattle edition. Brian is also a contributing writer for TheExaminer.com, a leading news source in the United States. In 2004, Brian left money management to launch Shoe Wallet Active Gear LLC. The Shoe Wallet has since been featured on NBC's Today Show, CNN, The Wendy Williams Show, and over 250 radio and TV stations across America. Pretty impressive. In our show today, we'll invite Brian to speak about strategies and timing with regards to capturing and increasing market share for a business. Brian, thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Hey, good to be with you, Kirsten.
So, history has shown that challenging economies like the one we're in right now have proven to be the best time to capture, increase, and it's essentially capitalize on market share. So the big question is how? Before the show, Brian, you had mentioned that for the right industries, you've learned that pro athletes are an underserviced marketplace. I'm sure our audience would be very interested in exploring this in a little bit more detail. But first, why would now be a time to increase market share? Aren't most businesses just trying to stay in business?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's really something we look back. It was more about 2009 as we began to see the economy begin to struggle and fall apart. 2008, 2009. We began to kind of look into really what has happened. It's always cyclical. Economies are cyclical. And we went back over the last 100 years and really looked at what did companies do during those times? And we came across something very interesting in the late 1920s. And it was really the first story we came across, an actual case study, where we were coming out of the crash, the 1920 market crash in the US. And we looked at two industry giants. It was Kellogg's and Post, brands everybody's familiar with in the cereal industry. And really it was two opposite courses of action those two companies took that was really intriguing to us. And what happened, to make a long story short, Post did what the reflex was to do in an uncertain time. They reined in advertising budgets, they cut back expenses, and they really played defensively. Kellogg's, on the other hand, went the opposite way. They doubled their ad budget and they got very aggressive with radio advertising, which was just beginning to build momentum back in that time period. And what happened, and what's so interesting about this, is Kellogg's in a very tough and uncertain time, they captured a market share at that time and actually watched their revenues rise during the collapse of the market in the following 10 years. And they became a dominant player at that moment that they've never lost to this day.
So what was unique about the actions taken in this case study?
Well, I guess what's unique, it goes back to the saying, it's kind of like the Warren Buffett, his philosophy is he's buying when everyone's selling and selling when everyone's buying. Taking the opposite course of action, especially during uncertain times, can prove to be a beneficial thing for your company. The hardest thing to do, though, is to take that action. And that's what we've tried to look back and understand. Some of the companies that did this, why were they successful? We watched companies like Kraft in 1933. They launched Miracle Whip. 1933 was not a good year down here in the U.S. And within 6 months, it was the #1 selling dressing in the U.S. Mm-hmm. Texas Instruments, first time the transistor radio became available was 1954. Another tough economy. We know where the transistor radio went. Apple, 2001 was not a great year in the markets, and Apple launched the iPod, and we've seen what's occurred from there. The iPod turned into iPhone and iPad, etc. So lots of success from these brands being innovative through these uncertain times, and that's really kind of the mindset we've looked at. We see a challenging economy as being one where there's a lot of innovation. When we're comfortable, there's not a lot of motivation to innovate. When we're uncomfortable, things are uncertain. This is, at least over the last 100 years, where we've seen the biggest innovations.
So how can businesses or brands start?
Well, one of the things we do, so with our Pro Athlete Direct brand, we're really, when we launched this in September 2010, what we found was there was an industry out there, the pro athletes. And as we looked into this industry group a little bit more, we found a lot of the generalizations about pro athletes. The generalizations were, the truth was actually opposite of what most people assumed about pro athletes. And as we began to look in this industry more, we saw there's a big opportunity for service providers, for businesses, nonprofits looking to get clients, customers, spokespeople, if you're a nonprofit, whatever. We saw the pro athlete market as a very underserved, untapped market to reach into, just like your question asked, like, how do you start? We've identified there's a great opportunity to grow market share now, and we've narrowed it down to a specific niche industry where we think there's a lot of opportunity to come in and not only work with the athletes, but also benefit your business in tapping this untapped market.
But Brian, aren't pro athletes difficult to access and work with?
Yeah, and that's another thing. It kind of goes back to a lot of the generalizations that people may have, whether they've worked with athletes in the past or haven't worked with them. And really what we found to be the case is oftentimes, now we're dealing with personality, so it doesn't matter whether someone's an athlete, a business owner, a doctor, a teacher, whomever. We're always going to deal with personalities. Yeah. But some of the parts, the sum of the group is really not a whole lot different than working with other industries. And what's interesting with the pro athletes that's unique about this space that we found is they have someone in place who is a mediator between themselves and the service world or business world or nonprofits. That's the sports agent. And there's a really unique twist about that and in that relationship they have with their sports agents that actually decreases the barrier of entry to work with pro athletes. And it's kind of one of the, I guess, what we've learned about this industry since 2010 that makes it very unique, but also a very good industry group to work with.
So Brian, where would a business go about actually accessing these athletes?
Well, really, the first course of action, always you want to work through the sports agent. There's plenty of people that may have relationships with athletes already. They may be members of the country club together or go to the same, have kids at school together, whatever. What we found is really you want to create relationships first with that sports agent. And as you move on to develop the relationship with the agent, you begin to get access to the athletes and develop those relationships. But really, the first the way to start, we tell people, is start with the sports agent.
And where do they need the help the most?
Well, the interesting thing, it was in 2009, the Sports Illustrated was a pretty groundbreaking article. And what it was May of 2009, and what the title of it was, "Why Do Athletes Go Broke?" Why and how do athletes go broke, I believe was the title. And really what this report found was a majority of pro athletes, we're talking over 50%, are within 2 to 5 years of retirement. Now keep in mind, these athletes, they're retiring in their mid to late 20s, early 30s. And when they're going broke and having financial issues that quickly into retirement, to us, that was the first big signal. And really, that's part of why Pro Athlete Direct was launched to begin with. Because I identified as a money manager for over a decade, up to 2004. And what I realized was this is an industry group that is hurting, that for whatever reason, the money is not being managed correctly. When you have 60% of NBA players broke within 5 years of retirement, 78% of NFL players broke within 2 years of retirement. I mean, these are big numbers, and these numbers just aren't impacting the athletes. They're impacting the spouses, the children, the families. There's a major ripple effect here that we began to zero in on is, well, what if we're able to come in and bring in better money management to these athletes? Could we possibly see those numbers drop, ideally down to zero? So that's really the number one place we see with athletes is their finances. If they get their finances in order, there's a lot of other opportunities to access.
Well, obviously there's an opportunity here, and thanks very much for shedding light on this, Brian. We appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot. It's good talking to you.
So we've been speaking with Brian Ouellette, the co-founder and CEO of Pro Athlete Direct. You can check out their website at proathletedirect.com. Thank you very much for joining us today, everyone. Talk to you soon.